first of all, yeah, welcome. We already had this part that was a little bit cumbersome. Sorry about this. I will go over the slides to make a short recap of the topic for today. Then we will come back to the Miro board and do the dot voting, and start the discussion lean coffee style. Let me share again the board. So talking about the definition of done. Let's get back to the roots a little bit, and let's start with the definition. And we can see that Agile Alliance describes the definition of done as a list of criteria that have to be met before certain effort, like a product, like a user story or task, is considered done. And Scrum Alliance gives a little bit more of a poetic definition, saying that the moment when the criteria of the definition of done are met, the product increment is born. So one thing that is important to mind about talking about the definition of done is that the definition of done is different from acceptance criteria. Acceptance criteria are the requirements for a specific task or specific user story to be done, while the definition of done is a set of criteria for a certain type of work to be considered done. So what are the benefits of having the definition of done? Winding on the definition of done means improving our collaboration, because everyone knows exactly which activities have to be accomplished, completed, and what has to be accomplished to consider that a certain task is completed, and there is no ambiguity about that. And of course, that also helps to achieve better quality of work, because as a part of definition of done, usually the requirements to coding standards, test coverage, and documentation are present. As well, that speed ups or reduces the amount of back and forth while working on the tasks in the sprint backlog, because everyone understands what has to be complete. What do we mean? What do we consider altogether when we talk about a task being completed, being done? So these are the main benefits. And let's talk now. Let's recap shortly. So what do we need to put in the definition of done? What are the typical components of the DoD? So usually there are 5 key elements that, well, it is recommended to include in the definition of done. So the requirements related to code quality, let's say certain coding standards and guidelines, requirements to all kinds of documentation, be it technical documentation or user guides, depending on the projects you are working on. Testing, so test coverage, the manual testing or automated testing activities that have to be completed before a certain feature can be considered done, and as well requirements related to review and approval, be it peer review or approval by the product owner. And finally, once we release a feature, then in most cases we need to make sure that certain deployment procedures are followed and adequate monitoring is set up. And quite often the monitoring and tracking tasks are perceived as something like an effort on top of the implementation by the development teams. So it is handy to include the criteria related to monitoring and tracking in the definition of done. So As well, it is very important to make sure that the definition of done is not simply a formal, like a formal document, but it is tailored to the needs and to the specifics of the project. So let's say, let me give a couple of examples. Like if you're working on your project, you're coding in Python, then probably it makes sense for you to stick to a certain style guide of this programming language. And if you're developing an application that has specific requirements to talking about accessibility, then it makes sense again to include the relevant standards in your definition of relevant user interface standards in your definition of done. So of course that's not relevant for other projects, but that is very specific to your particular situation. And while doing this, still you need to make sure that you leave your team enough flexibility so that the requirements, the criteria of definition of done would not become an unnecessary burden, but rather help your team to achieve better quality and speed of work. So if you make everything very specific, then you cannot foresee everything. You cannot create a perfect set of rules. So if you create a too detailed definition of done, then it becomes an unnecessary burden. In this case, if we add the testing related criteria, let's say we want to have 70% unit test coverage, that makes the definition of done flexible, because the engineers can choose which part of the system they want to cover with unit tests. All right. Well, do we need one definition of done for a team, or can there be multiple definitions of done? I would say that yes, you can have more than one definition of done, depending on the types of work your team is handling. And the definitions of done for different types of work will be will vary. So let me illustrate this with a couple of examples, and let's take a look at the definition of done for a spike, for a data analysis task, and the definition of done for an engineering feature going to production. So let's talk about spike, and we mean by spike we mean like a research or exploration. The outcome of this research or exploration would be a certain knowledge, so not necessarily some kind of a prototype that you can put into further work and build on top of it, but you will answer some questions that will help you to understand whether you can go down that particular road you were exploring, or you need to search for different solutions. So you don't need to create some like prototype minimal solution that you will be building on top further. If we talk about spike, so in this case, your definition of done can look the following way. So you need to define you need to make sure that as this is a research and exploration task, so the research question has to be very well defined upfront, and a certain area of possibilities should be also identified. Basically, which solutions do you want to try out? And that can sound like at least like the minimal set of solutions that you want to try out. Then some kind of time box, which is always necessary for research. The outcomes, the output in this case. So how do you document the findings resulting of your research work, and of course presenting the outcomes to the relevant audience. So that would be a definition of done perfectly suitable for a SPI. However, if you look at definition of done for a data analysis, then it will be different. Of course, we need to make sure that clear definition of the objective or clear question have to be in place. We need to be sure that the results are like the appropriate visualization is provided, or the explanation of the results, and as well, it is very important to make visible, to make clear which assumptions were part of this analysis, which assumptions this analysis was based on. Maybe there is a limited, of course, there was some kind of a limited sample, limited segment of the users that was taking part in, that was analyzed, or maybe certain metrics were calculated in some way that can have impact on the interpretation of the results. So these things have to be mentioned and mentioned explicitly, and as well the process, the approach that you took to achieve certain, to acquire certain findings. This process also has to be explained, because yeah, it may have an impact on the interpretation of the outcomes of the analysis. And again, presenting the outcomes to the relevant stakeholders should be a part of a definition of done, in my opinion, for the data analysis, because without presenting and getting feedback and having a conversation, it is very easy to run into all kinds of misunderstandings and wrong interpretations. If you just look at a dashboard that was created by an analyst, or look at certain like graphs generated in some notebook and screenshots taken from there, without the explanation, without being able to ask questions to the analyst, then you can easily get off track and end up with some wrong conclusions. So let's move on. Let's look at the definition of done for an engineering feature that ends up in production. And we can see that in case it will be a bit longer compared to a SPI, compared to a data analysis. So probably there will be more details, more criteria related to the user interface, to the code quality, and to monitoring and alerting. So basically to making sure that the feature operates well in production. What would be the activity? What would be the process? Let's recap. How would you create a definition of done with your team? I would suggest to make sure that you have everyone, like all the team members and relevant stakeholders on board. And by saying relevant stakeholders, I mean that if you're, let's say, if your stakeholders are internal, let's say you're a platform team and you're developing the capabilities for the other teams, then bring them in, because they can provide some very good insights in what do you have to include in your definition of done to be a better, to make them a satisfied customer. Again, we want to avoid long meetings, and we want to make sure that none of the meetings that could have been replaced by an email happen. So I would suggest to make this process partially asynchronous. Maybe you can, that also depends on how much the team members and the stakeholders involved, how much are they how well do they understand the concept of the definition of done and the benefits? If they're new to this, then I would call a short meeting, introducing the DoD, like going through a couple of slides, explaining what do you want to achieve, why are we actually taking time to create this this document, these guidelines, and after that, open up a asynchronous discussion, share a mirror board, for example, prepare the like parking lots for 5 essential components: the quality, the time boxing in case of analysis spike, and so on and so forth, and ask everyone to share their ideas, what kind of criteria they want to include in the DoD. And after that, end this up with the one session. Yeah, depending on the how many people are involved, but I don't think it has to be more than 2 hours. Also, make sure that everyone who is participating understands that you're not going to create some kind of a standard that you will stick to for the next 10 years, right? Make sure everyone understands that what you're creating is a living document, that you're going to to do the best, to create a definition of done up to your best current understanding. And then you will give it a try. You will give it a go. You will try it out for the next, like maybe 3-4 sprints, and then you will come back together and discuss this in your retrospectives and improve the DoD following the feedback of all the participants. Because that's important. That helps to avoid people getting really stuck into trying to push for some to really stand for their opinion, till the spending a lot of time on this. Okay, and I would really make sure to reiterate this at the closure, that yes, that's great. We have created this DoD. That's how we want to work up to our best current knowledge, but it's a living document. We're going to come back to it and reiterate on it based on the feedback of everyone impacted. So, yeah, Agile Alliance provides this very useful suggestions, advice on how you can actually understand as a coach, as a product manager, as an external, someone external to the team, whether the team is using their beautiful definition of done, which is hanging somewhere on the wall or is placed in a nice frame on Confluence. And Agile Alliance provides two signs of use of the definition of done. One is that the team members can actually find it and point to the show you the actual definition of done. Doesn't happen always, right? And then the team is actually using the definition of done when if they're working in sprints. Then when they're talking about velocity, then they use the definition of done to decide, to understand whether they can count in certain work as done within the sprint or not. And that gives you an understanding of whether the team members are actually using the DoD. Okay, let's sum it up and let's go over some drivers and restrainers that either help the team to create a strong definition of done or prevent or impede creating the definition of done. So the drivers would be, of course, everyone being on the same page, everyone understanding what is the purpose, like why we are doing this and how we're going to use the definition of done. Of course, it has to be simple. Doesn't make sense to create a definition of done out of 25 different points. It will be just never used, or it will cause certain stalemates trying to apply it. Technical expertise, something that I also wanted to elaborate a little bit more on. In case if you're working with the, if you as a team leader, if you know that the members of that particular team, like that will be creating the definition of done, may be lacking seniority, maybe lacking experience. That's fine. That always can happen. We work and learn. But in this case, it is your call to make sure that you invite someone more experienced. You invite, let's say, an engineering lead, or you invite someone from the team your team members collaborate closely with. So someone with a sufficient technical expertise, someone who have done already all kinds of mistakes and can suggest good criteria for the definition of done to avoid these mistakes done in the past. Because it really helps. Cross-functional setup, having all kinds of, we have a lot of specializations now working on the project, so it's not just backend and front-end engineering. We have all kinds of analysts, we have data engineering, data scientists, machine learning engineers, there are a lot of specializations. So if they are working in a team, creating a product together, let them all participate. And if you have data scientists on your team, like one data scientist or two data scientists on your team, and all the others are engineers, and both data scientists are on holidays, then probably this is not a good idea to call a meeting to create a definition of done without them participating. Make sure that all the specializations, at least representative of each specialization, is present when you are discussing the definition of done. It's not always possible that everyone is present, right? That would be the ideal situation when everyone is present, but doesn't happen all the time. Someone may be ill, someone, maybe on holidays. Okay, talking about the restrainers. Well, when someone has the loudest voice in the room, of course, that prevents different perspectives from being heard, and that is dangerous. So watch out for this. Sometimes, talking about pursuing a hidden agenda, sometimes the reasons why people oppose certain criteria to be added to the definition of done may be related to some more personal interests. In some case, that might be job security, that might be something different, but also make sure that you understand where the reasoning comes from, what's the real agenda behind why someone is opposing something or someone is pushing for a certain criteria, certain idea. Is this really in the interest of the team, or is this some kind of hidden agenda? And if it is, then it's a problem that you should work out as a team leader or as a manager. So different visions of an ideal team collaboration. What do I mean here? Is that well, everyone has a different understanding of what's the best way for the team members to work together. Someone wants to communicate with the stakeholders a lot. Someone wants to completely the opposite. Someone wants to be protected by the product owner and stay in their own ivory tower and work on their tasks without being disturbed. Someone wants pair programming. Someone works again focusing on just on their tasks and not being interrupted too much. So with all this different perspectives, different approaches to work. It is very important to work out simple rules and work agreements, and to understand that yes, okay, we are different. We have different habits about how we work, but that's how we are going to work as a team. And this is something that you need to do during the team lift-off. If you look at the previous Agile 2.1 events, then we had an event on, we had a conversation about team lift-off, and there is also a recording when we have discussed this activity. So yeah, the team members need to make sure that they understand how they're going to work together. What is the balance between working individually and working and collaborating, and so on and so forth. If this agreement is not in place, then it will be difficult to align on the definition of done. It will be probably difficult to discuss the approval process and peer reviews, things like that. So please mind this. All right, here are some links that you might find interesting. I will share the slides after the after the event, so you will have the links, and feel free to follow them. I hope you will find there something useful. Cool. And now we are done with the recap. Let me stop the recording and let's move on to the discussion.